right, yo, everybody. Here is another episode of the Mind Body Marathon. And on today's show, we have ultramarathon enthusiast and famous royalty Arlen Glick with us. So Arlen is on the show, Arlen Glick, and old routini Zach Goulet.
Routini string beanie.
Getting there, you're getting fit.
No, we're not.
You're not getting fit.
Not at this moment, but I will be.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, we are pale compared to this guy. This guy was just in Florida. Yeah. So what were you doing down in Florida?
Ever since I was a small kid, I'm still a kid. My family has been involved in prison ministry. So we travel a lot and get around. Yeah, I travel a lot for a lot of different reasons, but that's one, and that's why I was in Florida.
That's a phenomenal reason to go down there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's a unique experience, but it feels somewhat routine when you've done it your whole life. But yeah, getting behind bars and seeing guys that have experienced life that many of us don't comprehend or really even care about, really.
And this is what's amazing is, I literally just met you today, and I know of you. I've talked, almost on a weekly basis about you with other patients, just about your career and how fast you've gone and your successes, and which we'll get into. But just curious, I mean, it's like, obviously we talked a little bit about the prison ministry side of it, but it's like, what got you into running? What was your story? What's your backstory with that?
Yeah, I came to the sport of running from a different route than most people would find themselves, especially if they excel or went pro. The thing about running, like I didn't run in school or, my early days. It was simply just, I was your hobby jogger. Got into it in my late teens or early 20s, not even really sure when. It just was something that I just started doing as a way of just trying to get fit. Like I didn't want to be that guy that got fat and old because a lot of people just, let exercise go by the wayside.
Yes, they do.
So it grew from that, but it was literally just hobby jogging that turned into this thing where I was like, oh, running is actually a lot easier than it looks. And
especially
then it was, and then, getting into ultramarathons from a curiosity standpoint. You hear about people doing these crazy things, and then it's like, well, and then I would be the one that would think, I don't just wonder what that's like, but I want to know what my body feels like when I do that.
So what was your first race? Like ever?
My first race ever was there was like a 5K, 10K trail race down in Southern Ohio.
Okay.
That was just like a fundraiser for a boys camp. And so that was my first time ever putting a bib number on. I think I was 21 at the time. It would have been
I was just about to ask.
Maybe I want to say 2014.
Okay.
I think that's when it was. I went out there, towed the line with a bunch of people and like won the race. And I was like, what in the world? Am I like good at this? I had no idea up to that point if I was even good at running. I just loved it. I just loved doing it.
Yeah.
That's, I was talking to a fellow ultra runner in the area, and we were talking, and we brought you up, and just like he goes, it was Jeremy Pope, and he goes, have you talked to Arlen? And I was like, no, but I've been thinking about him a lot. And I was like, it's funny you say that, because I was actually going to reach out to him. And we were talking about you, and I was like, the thing I love about you is that I look at you as like I looked at myself when I first got into running, and it was just like the pure love for the sport. And then obviously, like, as you start to get success and you start to kind of hone that in, it becomes more about like bigger goals, championship style racing, more just like fine tuned. And with you, you've always kept that love, that like pure love for the sport.
Well, he wasn't sabotaged by college.
Exactly. You bypass that.
College running just puts you on this level of like intensity. And then for almost every runner that does it in college, it just steals the joy. And it's rare to see people continuing to do it for fun after college.
Well, and also too, like, I know we bring this up a lot, like when we talk about running, is having a life outside of running, and the fact that you're going down and going to Florida and doing the prison ministries, and you just have a life outside of it. And I mean, there's been times too when when we first started working together, where you like, hey man, I'm actually going fishing today, so I'm not going to be able to make it in. And it's like, you're enjoying the fruits of life, and you're not.
So how do you get training in? You know, like say like,
runs.
yeah, I mean, like what's your daily routine like? You know, when you're in the heat of training and you're doing the high volume and all that.
Yeah, when I'm in the peak training phase, I spend a lot of time out there on the trail.
Yeah.
I do have to drive for actual trail. I have the towpath, which runs right behind my house. So it's easy for me to get the miles in, but if I want to get trail, which, I love trail running.
Yeah.
I have to drive for that. So my favorite thing to do in life is to hook my boat up to my Jeep and drive to like West Branch or somewhere that there's trail and a lake. And I'll go and spend 3 or 4 hours out on the trail. And then I'll put my boat in the water.
That's phenomenal.
And spend the rest of the day fishing. And it's just a great way to relax after you did a good workout. Like that is my favorite day out of the year is when that happens.
You got it figured out, man. You got the magic ingredient.
I feel like t-shirts are going to start coming out about that one. Like the good life t-shirts and all that. That's awesome. Okay. So when did you even discover the concept of an ultra?
I started showing up at a few local races and quickly, was like, oh, I got to do a marathon or something. And it was through the running community that people started talking about these ultramarathons. And I was thinking to myself, oh, wow, you mean there's more? Like,
yeah,
there's more than the marathon. And coming to the sport from a curiosity standpoint, and then also from like just good work ethic, I absolutely love training.
Yeah.
I love high volume training. There's nothing I love more than going and just spending, 20 hours a week training. That is so much fun to me. So I don't even know how much I love racing, although I have to have a race to have a reason to justify the training,
right?
If that makes sense.
Yeah, the carrot.
So that definitely caters better to ultra marathoning than it does to shorter racing.
Yeah.
Not that I would even have the talent to do that shorter stuff, but if I did, I definitely, from an enjoyment standpoint, the ultra marathons are so much more.
Well, you like the process, you like the process, and the thing about an ultra is you're not going to bundle those up together. You're going to kind of have a season you're training for, and you end the season on an ultra, and you're kind of beat up, so you can't really do one for a while. So. You just got to get back to training and kind of go into the next cycle.
Yeah. And I think, you had talked about college runners, and I meet them all the time. People that when they find out I run, they're like, oh, I did too one time. And they'll quit completely because, I think so many times when we're driven by, performance, and if we have a coach in our life that's always trying to pound the best out of you to make them look good.
Yeah.
Then
that's a good way of putting it.
It's so many, because like I run with high school coaches and different people that are very involved in the sport. And a lot of times when you talk with them and they keep talking about all their athletes that are really too young to be doing what they're doing, but yet they keep getting injured and everything. And I feel like when I listen to them, sometimes it sounds like the coach knows better. And a lot of times they'll try to rein the kids back. But at the end of the day, the coach wants to look good. They want their kids to do well.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I know when I go out and train the way I do, people would probably think it looks reckless. But yet, when it comes to injury, I have actually been a pretty healthy athlete.
One can say.
Well, okay. So what is that? So if somebody was to look at your training, what are some hasty generalizations they can make from that? What's your style of training?
Yeah, I like to have an off season, which I usually just back off the running. And it usually is in the wintertime. All of my injuries have come from winter training, trying to get fit in the spring. So I like to let the natural cycle happen. And then usually throughout the year, I build a bit. So my first race in the spring or early summer is usually I go into it a little lower mileage, and then I become a lot more bomb proof as the year goes on. Usually my fall races are the ones where I show up the fittest for, whether I perform well or not. You know, there's a lot that can happen in an ultra marathon aside from just fitness. But yeah, it's
what
build
about
throughout the
volume and
season.
workouts?
This, when it comes to workouts, that gets a bit complicated because you have to look a little bit more of my whole career rather than just my latest and greatest workouts, because they've been pretty bad lately. As far as volume goes, usually I would like to hit at least triple digits before racing. It's been a long time since I've showed up to a start line with lower than triple digits. So not that I would need that, but on the upper end, 130 to 150 a week is probably what I'm typically hitting before a race. But we'll see. Things are probably going to change in the next year.
Now, how does that, the 130 to 150, like basically, 20 miles a day, right? So how do you break it up? It's
funny because people were like, "Oh, you did a long one today."
No.
And I'm like, well, I know 20 miles is a long run. But if you do it every day, is it a long run?
It's all relative.
And some people say, it's over 90 minutes is a long run, no matter how often you do it. But I ideally I would like to get back-to-back long runs once a week. Like usually for me, that would be like a Friday, Saturday. So I usually,
is that like a 50K? Then would you consider like a longer run?
I would say, probably more like 25 to 50 miles, like that range would be, because it's pretty common to do like 20 milers through the week. Or else a morning and evening run. I mean, when you just the math, and I always do take one day off. So whatever mileage I'm getting, I'm doing that all in 6 days. When you crunch the numbers, it ends up being 20, 25 miles a day. So between, doing 20-ish, 15 to 20 in the morning, and then maybe a run in the evening, and then slightly longer on the weekends.
Building, just a lot of building.
And if you're doing that all on the trails, that's a lot, or a lot of it on the trails. That's definitely a lot of time on your feet.
It is. And that's something that I think some people don't realize. We have to switch a bit. When I moved to the mountains, I have to switch my philosophy a little bit on volume. And I have to look at a lot of trail running. You spend about twice as much time on feet. So I don't like to go strictly off of time on feet, because then my mileage would dip into about half. And quite frankly, when you're running at half the pace, it isn't the same toll on your body. So I usually try to split that in half and go somewhere between mileage-based volume and time-based volume, if I'm getting into some really gnarly terrain.
So we kind of drove by the workout conversation. Is there workouts? Like in the heat, not necessarily now or moving forward, but like, have you historically integrated that to the high volume? I'm just curious because
there's a lot out there.
Different. That is very difficult to do with 150 miles a week.
Yes, it is. And
may not even be necessary.
Well, and you're right. I would have to say that sometimes I did what I could instead of what I wanted. So back in like 2021, I had some of my best performances were back in like 21, 22. And during that, I was doing a pretty good amount of speed work. Not a ton, but some. And also I was building a lot of volume at the time. Like between 2020 and 2021, there was a big change in like how much volume I was doing, which produced a breakout year. Okay. At the same time, I was doing some speed workouts, and I'm sure we'll get into later, me finding out I had a torn ACL.
Wait, what? You had a torn ACL? Oh, wait, you were talking earlier, you had surgery.
Yeah. But the crazy thing, and we're going to get really off on this, so I better just finish answering the first question on speed work before I go there, because I've had a torn ACL my whole running career. Like,
oh wow, there you go.
I tore it right about the time I got into running. Didn't ever get it checked out. Didn't really know
Were
it was
you just
torn.
like, oh, like my knees just
How
kind
did
of
you? How did,
Yeah.
well, how do you know that? Did
I
you,
was skiing, hurt it really bad,
Oh,
and then just like limped around for a while.
It's amazing.
And
See?
then it would have been one thing if I would have been running at the time a lot. I would have been like, oh shoot, I can't run. Let's
Yeah.
go get this checked out and find out what I did. But at the time, it was like big deal. If it bothers me, I'll worry about it then. And I just got really strong and learned to stabilize it without an ACL, which was
dude, huge. And I'm so
Crazy.
glad
That's
you're saying
huge.
this because, you know, I have a butchered ankle with a lot of ligaments that are not intact. And, you know, the surgeons are like, yeah, like if you can stabilize it with the tendons, go ahead. Like, you know, because we don't want to have to do surgery unless we absolutely have to.
well, I mean, I ran 30,000 miles on a torn ACL. So
If you can run 30,000 miles on a torn ACL, you can run on an ankle.
yeah. And so it gradually got better from the time I tore it
Yeah.
until about halfway through my running career. And at that point, I couldn't remember which knee was hurt back then. It actually got that good. But
so
then things kind of started going a little bit backwards, and I dealt with a hip injury back in 2022, early in 2022. And then from that time on, I dealt with compensation issues.
Yeah.
Where my right leg would always tire before my left leg. And the interesting thing is I could do however much volume I wanted, and it wouldn't bother me. But anytime I would do intensity or really steep climbs, it would just, my right leg would always wear out. And I think it was because I was, doing all the stabilizing on my right leg instead of my left leg, because of the lack of an ACL in there. And so that went on for several years until I finally started having some instability in my left knee. And that's when, be about a year ago, is when I finally got it checked out, got an MRI, and the surgeon sat there and looked at me and he's like, okay, I can't explain how you've done what you have.
He's sitting there like,
but he's like, MRIs don't lie. And there is nothing connected.
Dude, like old school radiology, like you gotta flip the spine or the knee over. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Well,
yeah,
it makes it kind of makes sense because when we did that long run at Camp Tuscazor, and you fell a couple times, and you're like, yeah, if I'm not like paying attention fully, that's when things start to go south. And like, this is when this happens. But when you made that post about your ACL, that was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, no, it's not that you're not paying attention. It's just because you have a torn ACL and that like you're trying to manage through this. And it makes so much sense. Like it just,
your feedback's just limited.
Yeah.
Like the ligaments obviously provide mechanical support, passive mechanical support. And what you did was, one, you either had a tight joint capsule, which protected you long-term, which that's genetic, or two, your bony structure orientation was set up so that it wasn't putting undue stress on the ACL chronically. But then eventually, muscles just can't pick up the slack to that level. And then, we start to get symptoms because the ACL, in addition to other ligaments, to provide proprioceptive feedback to the brain and what your body is doing in space. So that microsecond where that feedback is just not getting quite to the brain, then all of a sudden your instability it's off a smidge. And so that adds up over time.
Yeah. And that's probably one reason why I went a little crazy with the volume.
Yeah. You just kind of innately did that.
Well, and it was because it's like, well, if I can handle an unlimited amount of volume, but I can't do speed work, then I'm going to do something to get fit. And I'll have to say, even if you're doing it slow, if you're running 150 miles a week and then you're racing 100-mile races, like that produces good results. Like you can get really fit doing just only zone 2
That's
running.
another quote right there. But it's true. It's like what all the old school guys used to do in the marathon. Like your 70s, like Frank Shorter and Rogers and all that, they just cranked out volume, 150-mile weeks. Didn't necessarily have to do crazy workouts. They did do them, but they didn't have to. And you can run really fast off that. And there's a lot of benefit to just sheer volume. But the biggest benefit being a boost in blood volume, right? So you get more hematocrit and more red blood cells carried around the body. But then the other benefit is you get huge capillarization all throughout the body, which is basically you're building new capillary vessels all throughout these different structures, so you can attenuate lactic acid through a broader range. So it'd be like saying instead of having like a 1 gallon bucket, you've grown your bucket to 1.5 gallons. Now, like all of a sudden, you can put the same amount of lactic acid in there, and you don't get anywhere near the same results. So that's one of the genius mechanisms of that. It's also the same reason why altitude training works. It's the same mechanism. But the other thing too that's beneficial from high volume is you stiffen the passive structures and the tendons of the body as well. So if you took an athlete at the beginning of a training cycle like a marathon, and you measured the density of their Achilles and you measured the density of their IT band, it's smaller than it is at the end of the cycle. And literally as the volume goes, you could even triple those tendons. And those tendons will provide passive force to attenuate, essentially ground reaction force.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool.
This is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. So now, if you were to do speed, so like in 2022, when you kind of were tinkering a little bit with speed work, what were you doing? What were some were like fartleks or tempos?
I'm trying to remember what I used to do.
Do you have a coach?
No. Well, so I do now.
You do now,
but for the first time in my life.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. No. No.
Congratulations that you've avoided a coach this long.
Yeah. Maybe that's my little secret. I've never had someone telling me what to do.
Good for you.
Dude, motivation.
Yeah. So I reached out to a coach this year, and part of what inspired that is now I have an ACL, and now I'm hoping to do some. Yeah. I'm hoping to like redo things, like start doing speed work and whatever, all presuming on the future.
Dude, a whole new Mr. Glick here.
Yeah. And it does.
Glick 2.0.
You're talking
This
about
Iron
all
Man
of
coming
the you're talking about all of the benefits of high volume. And what's encouraging to me, what I like to hear is all the benefits, and also that's in my rear view mirror, because I know that like those miles are still in my legs.
Yeah.
And I'm still young enough that I should,
Yeah.
scientifically speaking, I should still be able to run fast.
Yeah.
And so now,
especially
I
in the
feel like,
ultra.
Yes. Especially
Connie had almost the world record at age 50.
Yeah. So in my sport, I should be doing all right. In the
for
future.
years to come. Well, and technology too is getting better, so training is looking a lot different. Even in the world of ultra, like now we're shoving carbon plates into ultra shoes and hoping for the best. Get out there and go get it.
I mean, you got that new ACL. You can probably punt a soccer ball super far now.
We'll see. I mean,
right at the start of the race. Look at that.
Yeah, from
we'll see.
From 19 to 31, I didn't have an ACL.
Yeah, just wobbly legs.
It's just incredible.
Yeah, that's cool. Incredible. Wait, so that means you didn't have an ACL for that race that got filmed. Was that Cocodona?
That's right. Yeah, Cocodona. So I back it up about a year ago. So it would have been in December. I ran a race in Thailand, and I was running up here in the CVNP like a week before that race, and I took a pretty bad fall. It was just super sloppy, nasty conditions. Shouldn't have been out there on trying to run trail, but slipped out, took a fall, and I like hurt my knee really bad. And I was like, "Uh-oh, that's really bad," and the timing's bad. But got up and shook it off, and it gave me no trouble after that.
Okay.
But then I started noticing during and after that race that I was having more instability. And, I was working with my physical therapist through, everything that injury prevention. I've always worked with physical therapists. And she was like, we need to get this knee checked out. I need to get an MRI. I need you to get an MRI. And she didn't tell me at the time, but, she knew I probably had a torn ACL. Anyway, so it took quite a while till we could finally get the result back. But when it came back, it was basically, I sat down with the surgeon and he's like, yeah, this is kind of what I thought was going on. But you've ran your whole life without an ACL. And at that time, my next and overwhelming question was, when can we get this fixed? Yeah. For me, it was a clear decision because I was like, okay, this is making a lot of sense. Why I can't perform the way I would like to. I can't do speed work. I haven't been able to for a couple years now. And it was like, it's slowly getting worse. And then once I was like, okay, this is more of more than just a longevity
Yeah.
thing. This is also a performance thing.
Right.
Like I need an ACL to be able to perform at the level that I
Yeah.
want to. And at the time, the next question was, when?
Mhm.
And he's like, we've never told an athlete that he can go do his event and then have surgery
Yeah.
afterwards. But they're like, for you, you have a race on your calendar. And if you want to, based on the fact that you've run 30,000 miles without an
Yeah.
ACL,
You've basically run to the moon and back.
yeah, you're probably not going to ruin it running another, 250
Yeah.
mile race, even though it was my first at the time. And so that was really fun being able to schedule surgery for 2 weeks after a race.
Have something to look forward to.
That's let it fly right there.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Yeah.
Rip
So
it.
I had my Hail Mary on my first ever 200 plus mile race.
So is that the race they filmed and they did a movie about and everything?
They did. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, one you want to check out. It's the name of the movie is going to be The Chase.
The Chase.
Yeah. It
Trailer looks awesome.
Yeah. The trailer's
So-
out.
When is it? Is it officially out?
So the trailer's out.
But not the movie.
They are no, not the movie. They are doing a filming a premiere they're trying to get to all the hometowns of the athletes.
The ones they profiled.
Yeah, so there were 5 athletes that they
5.
followed. One of which was myself. So they're going to bring the premiere here to Ohio, my hometown, Massillon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, on April 5th, and they're going
There
to
we
have
go,
it in
April 5th.
theater.
We gotta
So
go.
Is that
I
tax
already
day? No, it's not.
5th, not 15th.
15th, there we go.
Yeah. Get you in a good mood before
Here-
tax
Yeah.
season.
Yeah. Get you inspired.
Okay, so
Um,
April 5th, so people can see the initial premiere screening of it.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's one of the later ones. I think the last one is maybe the 15th or something, but they're doing like 3 different ones in Arizona,
Okay.
a couple in Colorado. But I think this is the only one east of Colorado.
So who are the 5? Or the 4 others?
Yeah, so it's myself, and then we have Jeff Browning. He's I'm gonna forget one of these, but yeah, Jeff Browning. So he's
pressure's on.
a Flagstaff guy. I'm terrible with names. We have Michael McKnight. So Jeff Browning's a long time. He's just a legend.
Yeah.
We have the king of 200s, Michael McKnight. He's won just about every one of these 200s that they have. And then we have String Bean. Somebody said String Bean. So that's in my head. Joe McConaughey, they call him String Bean.
Oh, come
he's
on.
That is a good nickname, man.
Yeah.
String bean out there.
Hey, they have merch available, and they have a shirt, String Beans, for him. So that would be a good one for you, Zach.
What do they
All right,
call
no
you?
credit.
That's funny you said that. Yeah, I'm called Snarlin' Arlen, and you'll never guess where it came from. Yeah, it was from the.
I love it. I want to hear you say that 10 times.
Yeah, Snarlin' Arlen. So where that one came from was Jeff Browning's one of his youngest boy, Abraham, writes. He's an artist, and he drew characters of all of us.
Okay.
And so they wanted to come up with something that fit me well. So they had to come up with something mean, because they found out. So when the guy was there filming at my house, they came to do this is an very in-depth movie into the life of
that's
the 5
cool.
Yeah,
athletes.
that's really cool.
So we're in my bedroom, and there's, my bedroom looks like Cabela's. If you've ever been to Cabela's or Bass Pro, there's mounted animals everywhere in there. Not a square inch of wall that doesn't have animal hanging out of it.
That is
So-
awesome.
So they thought this was the most ironic looking bedroom of an athlete ever. So they drew basically it's a picture of me, exaggerated slightly of my physical features, and then it has I'm basically mounted on a plaque.
Oh, there we go.
Sounds like a monster truck name.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good one.
So that's that. So we're still naming the characters in the
So
movie.
I hope they're going to show a picture of this in the film, of the OG drawing of this.
I should talk to the filmmaker and say,
That's
hey,
pretty
we
cool.
need the characters at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Because right now you can order T-shirts. You can pre-order these T-shirts with these. Pick the character you want.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So that's a neat idea. It should be part, because this movie is going to go down in history. It's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a very legendary project.
What makes you say that? Like, just because you had fun doing it, or
it seems like it's pretty in depth.
You think
it's
you come to some good
in-depth.
conclusions?
The story that it tells, and I'm not going to blow it.
Yeah.
Okay. But the story, and it's so, when they thought of doing the project, it was, they saw potential. They're like, this race could be won like never before and never after. And so they were presuming that this would make a neat story. And it just, it was blown. It exceeded expectations, so much so with the story that was made. I mean, I guess I could drop a little hint because it's probably, the hint is left in the trailer, the chase, where it was in my post-race interview, where I had not, like, the reality had not sunk in yet. When you go 60 something hours without sleep, and then you have one night of sleep, you wake up the next morning, you haven't had time to process what just happened.
Yeah.
You've been a trauma victim a self-induced trauma victim for a couple days, and now it's unraveling. And then I remember looking over at the filmmaker as he was doing the post-race interview, and he looked at me and he said, "I think you just named the movie." He's like, we've been trying to get something. And
wow.
When you watch it, it'll all make sense why it was so significant, but I don't want to blow it. I want to make people want to watch it instead of be like, oh yeah, there's a really cool movie out there.
Right.
So if people want to go to Massillon to see it,
yeah, you can buy tickets. Yeah. I was informed that we have the oldest theater in the nation in my hometown. I didn't know it up until this point.
Didn't know that either.
Dude,
what's the website that?
It's on Aravaipa. So Aravaipa was the one that did the project. They own the race. They own. It's a huge running company. Great people. I'm super good friends with the people there at Aravaipa. But yeah, they would have it on their website and whatever. You can find it through Aravaipa.
Okay.
So was this one of the more memorable races of yours?
Yeah, for sure.
Just because of the gravity of the film and the documentary of it.
Yeah, it is. It in so many special memories and all that I was going through. And that's the one thing that the film doesn't go into depth into where I was at in my life with my surgery.
Right.
If you can imagine my last race, and I'm the only one that knows because I decided not to go public with it until after the surgery. I didn't want anyone to know because it's like, I didn't want them to know that I'm running with a torn ACL. Yeah. I didn't want other people weighing in. It's
just an extra.
It's an extra level of scrutiny. Yeah. Yeah. I was 110% set on that I was making the best decision for me. And at that point, you don't want to hear someone else's opinion.
Right.
So, but all that I was going through at the time that, people were unaware of. They were talking about how crazy this event was. And truly it was hard and difficult and the most bizarre thing in the world in my lifetime anyhow. But there was so much more depth there to me. So yeah, it was. And
did you learn a lot about yourself during that race?
I did.
Yeah. Like more than you normally, like, especially in the races that you've done, like what are some things that, or does it go in, do you talk about this in the film?
No, the film is not about me.
Right.
I'm just a highlighted athlete in the film. There's 5 of us. We didn't even get through the list of athletes.
No, we're moving
we better finish this.
Thankfully, you have a good memory.
Yeah, let me just knocking my memory, and now you reminded me. So we better finish the athletes. Yeah. So we had I mentioned Jeff Browning, Mike McKnight, and then there is this is terrible. I remember to swing back, and then so I don't know if I should spoil it or not, but the guy who won the race was not part of the project. So
leave him out.
Yeah. So they sort of they brought him in, but it really, there again, the movie is so good. It captures the whole.
I feel like
moment.
we just got to blow past this. We can't be saying names no more. You guys
he's got to get 4 and 5.
Well,
He'll remember it later.
you want to test me on my memory here, and I'm trying to throw us off, derail us here.
Let's test you on your memory. What year was the Massillon Theater built?
I don't know that.
If
So
it's the oldest
okay,
one.
so there's another Michael. You can't forget about that. Michael Versteeg. He's a
Okay.
Prescott guy, a local runner.
Mhm.
Interesting guy. There again, you gotta watch that.
I'm sure there are a lot of interesting people, and I'm sure that probably blew their mind about your room.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was like a curveball they were not expecting.
there is something that is so significant, the story behind each of the athletes. And that's what they wanted. They wanted something that you learn a lot about the person, not just the performance, because we're such a performance driven world.
Yeah.
Like any athlete that you see in the movie, you think of them by what they've accomplished, what they've done. And, like we discussed earlier, there's so much more to life than running.
Yeah.
Running, even if you're a pro, running is still just a sliver of your life. And so I think that's what they wanted to capture in the movie was, there's a really cool story. There's the most competitive 200 field of athletes that we've ever had. These are coming together. This could make a really cool story, but then it blew all of our minds as to what it actually turned out to be.
Yeah.
What would you say is your most? Did we cover the 5?
Is there still one? We have Jeff, Mike, String Bean, and then myself, right? That is 5. Okay.
Cool. All right.
Maybe we got, wow.
So is there one other race that stands out as the most? Like, what would you say is if I look back on my career, I can think of a handful of races where I was like, things were just clicking and I was just sort of unstoppable that day. Like, what are some of those experiences for you? Like, what's another event?
Yeah, my pre-pro days were those days where things were clicking. I think back to 2021. I won Umstead 100 that spring. I went to the Mohican 100, and I was like pretty confident I was going to get the course record. Like I was feeling more confident than I usually do. And I went, and then I ended up running like an hour and a half under course record. So
just
absolutely blew my spreadsheet out the window. It was one of those kind of days.
Yeah.
Completely redefining what was possible.
Yeah.
I mean, the race director came up to me afterwards and he goes, somebody called me and said you were about to finish. And I'm like, what, the 50 miler? And they're like, no, it's a 100 miler. And that was one of the, and he's like, that's impossible. We've never had someone finish in daylight. And like, it's still, the day's young. Anyway,
that is awesome.
That was probably one that was the most memorable because that was like a serious breakout performance.
Significant step.
And then to back that up, I went and, broke the record at Burning River.
Yeah.
5 weeks after that. And then I won, that year was just one thing led to the next, and just build on it. And then I ended up going out to Arizona for my first big race out of state. And that's where I got a golden ticket at the Javelina 100 and got me into Western States. And anyway, it's all history, but yeah, that was the little walk through my breakout year.
Nice. Now, what did you end up doing at Western States?
I ended up getting 3rd at Western States. And it was interesting. I got injured in February that year. A hip injury came up, and in hindsight, it was probably knee related, but when you don't have knee pain, you don't look at your knee. Like my knee never hurt me.
Yeah.
So, but that was kind of, it was actually during Western States that the compensation really started showing up. And like a lot of people, if I'm talking to brands or if I'm like, my status in some ways much revolves around that. Oh, well, a podium at Western States is all you need. Right. But to me, it was like, that was actually a critical point in my career where, it was actually, things were turning towards the worse. And I wouldn't understand this all until I raced however many 100 milers after that, till I found out, oh, actually, I'm kind of hopping on one leg and I have been all along. Yeah. And like, that was just where things started blooming a little bit.
Now, could anybody tell this from your running form? Like, did you have a, hitch to your giddy up or, like anything like that?
There were times I did, and people would point it out to me. But there again, it was always like when my hip wasn't feeling good, that's when I would have a hitch. And there were times when I wasn't running from that. It was, I would say, barely noticeable, but probably the people from my run group behind my back would say, oh yeah, Arlen has the way he runs. I mean, whatever, even people that are perfectly healthy all have their own little form.
Yeah.
You can spot it from a long ways away.
Yeah. I know. That's what I write about in the book. In my book about that, it's like, we all sort of have these distinct sort of fingerprints of form. And some of them is non-negotiable because it's just, it's just the way you move based on joint mechanics and DNA and all that sort of stuff. But other things you can manipulate. So walk us through your feeling for races. Like, what's your strategy there?
Yeah, things have changed a lot over the years. I'll just start out by saying I am probably like the most flexible athlete when it comes to fueling. So I can do really well on fat, but I also can take a ton of carbs in. So I have a lot of flexibility. I'm probably the only 100-miler specialist that can say he's never thrown up during a race. So I have that going for me.
You still got that streak going?
I still got that streak going. I thought surely I was going to kill that at Cocodona, the 250. Like I thought surely that was going out the window. But here we are today.
It's that country gut.
Yeah, country gut.
Got those good microbes.
And I can eat like nobody else. I've never been beat in an eating contest. That's my next that's my next sport is eating.
I know a lot of ultra runners are starting to mimic what professional eaters do for training. So you're ahead of the game.
Wait, what do you mean? I've never heard
I've always been doing this. I just didn't know it was beneficial to my running.
Exactly. So like some of the higher level ultra runners who want to try to get into like 120 grams of carbs or 150 grams of carbs in an hour are mimicking
chestnut.
Yeah.
I wonder how good chestnut would be in the ultras.
And Kobayashi and like all those guys, like they're mimicking their eating or how they train to competitively eat.
You're probably talking about David Roche.
He brings about that, or he talks about that.
And so he's the coach that I reached out to at the beginning of the year. So he's the one that I'm working with this year.
There you go.
To try to have some new breakouts.
Well, and Jason Koop had Killian's physio on, and he talks about how to be able to withstand the high intake of carb, you have to at least train your gut to be able to have that. So have something dense, have something heavy, have it often. It doesn't have to be gels. It doesn't have to be what you train with, but it has to be something that your body can process and learn how to process efficiently. But he also said too, going back to that country gut, that you need to be in good gut health. So
oh yeah. And I've been implementing certain levels of this my whole career. I remember I used to go out and run on the track because it was the only place in Ohio that had full sun exposure. And I would just run on the track, and people would be like, what, you ran like 20 miles? What in the world are you thinking? Why would you go there? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to sweat so that I can drink, so that I can train my gut, so that when I'm racing in Arizona, I can down 40 ounces of water and still jump up and run after that. So it is a lot of, gut can be trained and should be trained.
Yeah.
If we want it to function the way it should.
So you said you can do well on fat. Did you have a particular race that you're like, I'm just dabbling with fat? And then, or was it just that you can do okay with that?
I've experimented different things, and some of it was just like on the day I would just try things. I've done some really crazy things like pacing someone for 100-miler where I got halfway through my pacing duties, which ended up being 9 hours. And I was like, I guess I haven't eaten anything for the first, 5 hours of this pacing duty. And I'm like, I wonder if I could go the whole 9 hours without eating. So I went like 9 hours of slow running without eating anything. So it's like, well, at that point, I'm like, okay, so I am I can burn fat pretty efficiently. Anyway, but there again, like if you want to run with carbs, if you want to run with carbs, if you want to train with carbs and get those benefits, I think if you want to race with carbs, I think you do need to train with carbs.
No question.
You kind of got to get in one boat or the other because you can't straddle the fence too much on that.
Now, what about are you goos, bars, real food? Like, where are you at on that spectrum with everything?
Yeah, I've tried pretty much everything. If I'm going with carb, just straight carbs, I'm going to go with something with no flavor. Whether it's, Morton or just whatever's the cheapest thing I can buy. I can go liquid or gels, although liquid is really easy. If I'm taking basically straight sugar, liquid is the easiest to get down, but it's a bit more complicated in ultras because the crewing, I may go 6, 8, 10 hours, whatever, without seeing my crew. So gels are a lot easier to pack with me, but I can drink Morton or whatever and just basically bypass, just not think about the flavor, and it doesn't bother me.
Have you tinkered with Morton's bicarb at all?
I have not. I'm excited about
It's a new hot topic.
Yeah, it's a hot topic. I have not yet because it did not gain a lot of traction, at least not that I heard of, until I was recovering from surgery. And so, and I haven't been I've been working really hard. I need to talk to David and be like, hey, when can I start experimenting with that?
What is the fastest mile you've ever run that you've ever seen?
Oh, I don't even know. Not much under 5 minutes. Like, maybe,
you have gone under 5.
Yeah, I have.
Good.
I'm not sure if how much I've dipped below that. But no, in fact,
That's such a cool thing to not know. You've run 30,000 miles and you have
I will say
the fastest one ever. I love that.
I will say that one of my fastest miles ever has probably been on trail. Like, I've been very close to 5 minutes on trail.
That is crazy. That's like reckless.
Yeah,
dude.
that is.
Yeah, and that's
like a gazelle through the woods.
Yeah, I would venture to say I have for sure not run 10 minutes faster than on like road than I have trail, or 10 seconds faster in a mile ever. So anyway, so without an ACL, by the way, just a little
throw that in there again.
That caveat's at the end of this episode for everything. Now, do you have good reflexes? Are you good hand-eye coordination?
No, I'm terrible.
See, that's shocking that you could run that fast on trails but not have good reflexes.
You should see me when I'm trying to do an exercise at the clinic, any jumping or any exercise. It is the most laughable thing.
What about dancing?
Bethany once told me I look like a baby deer trying to learn how to walk, because I am terrible when you tell me to do it. Now, if you tell me to go run a 6-minute mile down sketchy loose rock,
see you later.
No problem. See you later. Yeah, see you at the bottom.
Yeah, I guess you're right. A deer doesn't really know how to dance, so it's not like it really needs to know those.
Yeah, it just needs to know how to get away.
You can give me a square box and tell me to jump in and out, and I will screw it up some way or another. I will mess it up. I'll be doing it wrong. Yep.
That's amazing. So tell us about your hip. So what's going on with that?
So I've, alluded to hip issues. Usually it's left hip, left knee, ACL. And I'm still saying it's got to be related to knee. And I knew going into ACL reconstruction. So I've dealt with, I've had it my whole running career. So I knew that, it's getting a little bit worse, but I knew it would get really bad when we actually went to repair it. So it was one of those situations where I knew I was going to have to take 10 steps back. That way, hopefully someday in the future, I can be 1 step forward.
Yeah.
But we're still probably like 1 step back, and we got like 2 steps to go to be better than I ever was. So I feel like we're getting really close. But yeah, just recently I had surgery back in May, and this is February. So we're like,
so what's your volume at?
I got up to almost 60 miles a week before I had this hip niggle. So I'm pretty low right now. Although, like, when you're talking volume thing, there's so many variables. Like right now, I'm doing 1 to 2 hours a day of cross training and like some pretty tough stuff. Like,
So you're like cardio fit, but you're not running a ton.
Right. I do believe I'm very fit right now. But just not running. And just wait until the mechanics. There's so many things when you're coming off a surgery like that you just, like, PT, they're so picky with, and for good reasons. And I want to be better than I ever was. I don't want to be limping around. So anytime something's not right, they're like, let's get this right and then turn you loose, because we don't want to develop bad habits just because you had a surgery that you were trying to make yourself better, and then you jumped the gun and now you're worse. Right. So, I keep reminding myself, I chose to do this. I'm going to do it right.
Yeah. Now, you signed with Kraft?
I did. Yeah.
When was that?
It would have been the beginning of 23 is when I signed with them. So
congrats. Yeah. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. It's been really fun. They've been a really fun company to work with. We're going, that reminds me. Yeah. Here in a couple of weeks, we're going to Italy for the yearly, once a year, they get the whole team together. So we all get to learn.
That's pretty sweet.
And
so they're based in
a bunch
Italy?
of new, no, they're based in Sweden.
Yeah.
But we go over to, it's been Europe every time.
Yeah.
So this will be my third time to Europe for this particular event. And they pick a different place every time. So we're not seeing the same thing. And they have a bunch of new athletes this year. So we get to meet some new teammates.
Oh, cool. Did they so they just recently signed new athletes?
They did. They just signed, it's like 6 or 8 athletes they took on this year, basically doubled their team in 1 year.
So you guys are growing.
I guess. Yeah.
Now, are there any races that you are dying to run that you're just like, dude, I have to get to that race. I have to get to that start line.
Like bucket list races.
Yeah, bucket list.
Oh yeah. The bucket. I switched from a 5-gallon bucket to a 55-gallon barrel because that bucket was just not going to hold what I wanted to run. So I got to run some of the best races in the world, Western States, Hard Rock, the bucket list races. But honestly, one that was on my bucket list before any of those was Badwater.
I was going to ask about that one.
And it's still there. I absolutely loved heat training. In fact, just today I'm building my own sauna and in my basement. So I absolutely love heat training, and I want to have my own sauna in the basement. So that's
you and I are cut from the same cloth right there. I mean, for sure. And of all the ultras, Badwater's been the one that I'm very intrigued with, and for that same reason.
And that's probably why it was on my bucket list before any of the others. From a non-competitive standpoint or a general public viewpoint, they know of about a handful of ultras, and Badwater is one of them. They don't know about we just had Black Canyon. That's like the most competitive 100K in the nation for sure. And people don't know about that one. People in the running community do, but the general public, and that's one reason why I would like to run Badwater is just the history there. The crazy, the stories, uniqueness.
Well, it's so cool because it's one of the lowest points on Earth and one of the hottest points on Earth, and you run to the base of one of the highest points in the continental U.S. And it's just like you just say that and you're like, that's crazy. That's checking a lot of crazy boxes right there, and it's just sounds awesome.
Yeah, and I'm dying to know if I'm not going to run on the white line because I want to know if my shoes actually do melt.
I know. Part of me is intrigued too because we used to always go out to Mammoth Lakes for training camp, and
really Zach's funny. Still laughing.
That's really funny. Like, I'm not going to run on the white line. We all know about the white line
till you get those blisters. But
my shoes melt.
I remember you couldn't touch door handles. You had to use your shirt to open car doors and stuff. It's crazy when you're out there and legitimately in the summer because we would go from Vegas to Mammoth. And we stopped in Badwater and went to the basin and checked everything out. And, it's in August, so your car is instantly just steaming. And you legitimately cannot touch the handles. It's crazy. And if you're on sandals, you feel you feel them softening under your feet. It's wild.
And then melt.
Yeah. I love desert. I love heat. It's probably just a reaction to growing up here in Ohio and being, basically we live in a jungle. That's basically what we live in.
Well, the other thing too is I like the idea. I get very claustrophobic. So that's why a lot of trails bother me because I don't have enough vision. I don't see the horizon enough. And so that's why that concept intrigues me because you're just literally staring out for 50 miles out in front of you of where you're headed.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I love it. I want to do it so bad. But the one bad thing from even a professional standpoint or a trail runner standpoint is Badwater's in July. you know,
There's a
you
lot
can't
going on.
really get in the mountains until, you know, late June, early July.
Yeah.
And so that's when the mountain racing season starts off. Yeah, you can stay in the mountains till September, October. But if you run Badwater, you run 135 miles on pavement in July, your trail legs are not going to be
Yeah.
Ready to
worth
go.
a whole lot the rest of that trail running season. So you kind of have to devote, if you're a trail runner and you want to run Badwater, it kind of swallows your season.
It has to be, it has to be it. Like that has to be the race.
Yeah, and the other bad thing is, you know, with race lotteries and qualifications and everything, like trying to get in Western states, if you're on a golden ticket hunt, like Badwater is a really nice one. It, you know, if I don't end up in any of the races I want to be in, then I want to run Badwater, of course, because my summer's wide open.
Right.
But Badwater, you have to apply in like January.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's an early application.
It's really complicated trying to build your season.
Yeah.
Is it still the same owner of Badwater? Is it still the same not owner but race director?
I couldn't tell you. I do not know that much about it.
Because if it is, he's like, he doesn't like, if you tried to flex the professional card, he's like,
I don't.
Well, I know they have a Badwater in Brazil now.
Yeah.
It runs in the north part of my wife's state, and that's on trail.
Yeah,
so you can kind of consider that too.
I think I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
And Badwater does have a few ways you can race your way in, but there again, like if you want to race your way in, you race like this year for next year.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I don't know how the lotteries are going to treat me this fall next. Anyway, it's complicated.
Yeah.
What about international races? Any interest in some other ultras internationally?
I do have a lot of interest in international races, especially it's kind of like, you know, you grow up and you spend a lot of time thinking about all of the races here in the US. And so those are kind of all in the back of your mind, all the bucket list races. And then it's like, well, when you are pro, then it's like, oh, I shouldn't be running these races. I should be doing the ones while I can. I should be doing, you know, go to other places. So it is a little bit of a tug of war between, do I want to do what I've always dreamed of doing, or do I want to do what I'm going to wish I did when I'm an old grandpa?
That's a good point. So we're kind of rounding third on the episode here. So do you have any final points or kind of topics you want to bring up, or any words of wisdom to our audience?
You know, I think I probably want to swing back to kind of a question that Zach asked earlier, and then we got a bit distracted, was like, what did I learn about myself?
Boom.
Bam.
Running Cocodona. And I'll have to say, you know, paint the picture how it really looks from my view. I ran over 20 100-mile races before I ran Cocodona, my first 250-mile race. And so I had a lot of experience going into that. But the one thing that daunted me about doing it was this bad thing that happens every time I run a 100-mile race. Okay, so I get done and I get the chills, and I sometimes get really nauseous, and sometimes I'll throw up. But bottom line, I just about freeze to death. I have to be basically treated like a newborn baby when I'm when I finish these races. And I was thinking, how in the world am I going to go through multiple days, multiple nights, and just to throw out some random crazy details like Cocodona? It hits about 90 in the day, and then nighttime when you're up in the mountains, it can be in the 30s.
Jeez.
So you go from desert, fully exposed, the hottest conditions you would ever find here in Ohio, to freezing cold at night. So you have huge temperature swings.
Sometimes wind too.
And wind and everything that Arizona can throw at you. And so you have all these variables, and I'm going to go into multiple days of this.
Yeah.
And I know my problem of when I sit down to try to eat or do something that I'm going to have to do during a multi-day race. My biggest fear was, I'm going to get the chills. I'm going to get nauseous, start throwing up. Then my legs are going to seize up, and like it's game over. But this is where I just like, sometimes you have to just jump into the future and just like face your fears. And this is where my eyes were opened, and I realized it was not a physiological problem. It was a mental thing. And this is where it broke free, because when I ran to Cocodona, I mean, I slept during the race about an hour and a half out of the 60 plus hours that I was running. Little tiny naps that did huge things for you. If you haven't tried it, you got to try a nap in the middle of a race. But I was able to sleep, warm up while I was sleeping, wake up, get up and go. And then when, I never locked up, never got nauseous, all these things that happened to me at the end of all my races wasn't happening to me.
Oh, that's cool.
But guess what? I got to the end of the race and immediately I had the chills.
Oh, wow.
I was starting to feel nauseous again. All of the things that happened to me at the end of my 100-mile races was happening at the end after 3 days and 2 nights of running.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, or more afterwards, I was like, I never had the problems I thought I was going to have, because it's a psychological thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you're done, you're done. Even taking a nap, my brain still knew that it wasn't over. It was still game on, even if I was sleeping.
Yeah.
And so that was just like a potential that I feel like I unlocked, but also something that I learned about myself and about us and about the mental side of racing. Because we can talk mental all day long until you like get this new revelation.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't even touched on that topic, but you're right. You let your guard down, and then all of a sudden your physiology changes, and the brain goes, "All right, well, we don't need to, drop adrenaline and epinephrine right now. We can start to dump out growth hormone and some different things that are going to start to heal the body, and that changes fluid dynamics. And all of a sudden, boom, things start pulling to the core, right? All your blood starts to go to the vital organs and the viscera, and then leaves the extremities, and blood pressure drops like a rock. You become hypothermic. Yeah. It's very predictable.
Crazy.
But it's wild that it happens so extreme for you.
Yeah. And like, you would just think that, after your body does this for 3 days, it would figure, okay, this is going to be my life or whatever. But nope. Within an hour of when I was done with the race, the mind and the body were both in agreement that, okay, it's over now.
Let's start shivering.
Man, that is great insight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I had such fun on this episode. We'll have to have you on again at some point. And maybe then we can talk about the mental side of it, because we didn't even touch on that topic.
Yeah.
We can deep dive in that one.
We were talking about training and physiology and all that sort of stuff. But everybody listening, please take a gander at the movie The Chase, coming out in April, May-ish, to the general public. The showing, as we mentioned, is April 5th. The showing local in Ohio will be down in Massillon at the oldest theater in the nation.
Lincoln Theater, I believe.
The Lincoln Theater-ish in Massillon. April 5th. Get tickets online if you're interested. And if you can't make that, then make sure to check out that film if you are a running enthusiast, because it's going to be amazing. And even if you're not a running enthusiast, it's going to be an amazing film. I think it's going to be very dramatic. I feel like I have so many patients that talk about, what's the Barkley Marathon and all that stuff, that they're like, oh, did you see that Netflix, movie? But it's like, this will probably be one of those films that I think will tap into the general public, and it actually inspires a lot of people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hope this is the case.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there's so many things that happen when you do something like that. And it is fun to make that accessible. Yeah. Because for those who maybe don't have the freedom to go and train and to find out what that's like.
Yes.
It is fun to be able to give that to someone else.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for making your way down, and we'll have to have you on again.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Till another week. All the best. Dr. Leo here. Be sure to check out my new book, Faster Without Fail, Your Guide to Overcoming Injuries and Running Faster Than Ever. It is now available on Amazon. You could read reviews on the Amazon. You can check out what other people have said about it. But basically, if you want to revolutionize your running form and better understand how to stay injury-free within the sport, this is your guide. Feel free to reach out and let us know what you think of the book. I would love to hear your feedback. But again, please check it out on Amazon. Faster Without Fail. Appreciate it. Dr. Leo here. If you want to catch me in another setting, be sure to check out my YouTube page, Running Rehab, where you will find exercises on how to stay healthy with running, how to improve your running form, and a bunch of other tips and tricks on how to get over common injuries.